Alex is a principal security architect at Sysdig. Prior to his current role, he spent the majority of his time working in the world of open source software on identity, authentication, user management, and security. As a side note, Alex would be happy to have a spirited conversation about bioluminescence or fungus. Please welcome Alex for his talk, Security Testing is an Art and Science.
Hey, thanks everybody. So this talk was put together by me and a buddy of mine, Puneet. Puneet can't be here today. Amazon has a bit of a travel ban going on right now, and they won't let him leave the state of Texas at the moment. So you just get me today, unfortunately. Like I said, my background is predominantly in open source. That comes from a career that was spent mostly in higher ed, K-12, and public sector work. A lot of that was forced because, you don't get a big budget when you're in those areas. And so you got to figure out different ways to get things done. This talk really kind of goes born out of the fact of how do we do security assessments and how do we do testing against our tooling in a way that's standardized, right? If we want to be able to compare things laterally across different products, different suites, different clouds, different infrastructure, we need somewhat of a baseline to do those things with, right? So what tooling's out there, what exists, how can we handle these things? So that's kind of what we'll do. We'll go over. We'll talk a little bit about kind of the infrastructure we live in today. I would suspect everybody in this room is probably a mix of assets that are either in cloud-oriented assets or on-premises assets, and we have to treat those differently, unfortunately, right? Stuff in the cloud is not the same as it is on-premises, mostly because we've got a bunch of things called APIs and standards that we can use to go really quickly. Unfortunately, our adversaries get that same benefit. Then we'll kind of go into some of the open tooling that's out there we can look at, and then kind of hit into some of these cloud and runtime detection concepts. So if at any point you got questions, feel free to stop me. I'm more than happy to field whatever comes up. So time, it's kind of the currency of the cloud, right? And I use that phrase because it's pretty evident, right? The cloud is about saving time, doing things faster, changing the way we do and conduct business, and it basically becomes the thing we care about the most. Just to level set, I put this slide in here. This room, I don't think I actually need to cover it at all. I would expect you all know what a TTP is. If we don't, you can hit me up afterwards. We'll have a spirited conversation, but we'll skip this one. So I want to start with the cyber kill chain, right? So this set here is really about in my infrastructure, in my setup of kind of everything. What do I need to care about? What do I need to kind of go on a step-by-step process? Basically, our goal as security professionals should really be to invest in stopping these things before they get too far right? We want to go on the left side as much as we can, find things in the reconnaissance, the weaponization, the delivery stages, and hopefully be able to stop them before it becomes an exploit, before it gets installed, before there is command and control events. So our goal is to really live in the left side of this kill chain. Ideally, that's what we do. Unfortunately, the reality is we often also live in the right side. It's just the world we live in. It's how it goes. But I'm hopeful that with the tools we'll talk about here today, we can do a little bit better of a job living in that left-hand side. So why does it matter? How has it changed? What's different? I like to think of our traditional infrastructure that we have out there kind of like this castle, right? I think most people understand the analogy. You basically, at one point in your life, had this wonderful world to live in where you had defined ingress and egress points. You knew exactly kind of where stuff originated from. Your infrastructure was much more simplistic. It made detecting intrusions, detecting breaches a little bit easier. The area it broke down was what we just heard about, people clicking links, right? That's a significant issue. Those introduced new entry points, new areas we didn't expect. But when we thought about it from an infrastructure perspective, it was all very, very clear. When we went to the cloud, things got a little more insane. Basically, that castle became a carnival, right? You no longer controlled ingress and egress. You no longer got to dictate what your perimeter was. You didn't get to build a fancy moat around your golden assets. All of that kind of went out the window because your developers decided they needed to be more agile, quote unquote. They wanted to move faster. They wanted to be able to iterate as quickly as they possibly could. So we said, great, let's do that. The cloud will help us enable that. The downside is that the exposure and the risk went through the roof, right? So more than ever, things like IAM roles and permissioning comes into play hugely, right? If we think about the The risk of exposure, overly permissive accounts and roles, that's probably the single biggest area that we have at risk, right? We got to do something about that yesterday, basically. But the cloud has introduced other problems with this as well. So I like to show this one with an attack example. So this is a attack called Scarlet Eel. Basically, it is what is considered a cloud native style attack these days. Basically, it is one that relies on a complex set of tactics and techniques to gain access. So this could be that someone clicked on an email and got in somehow, got some initial creds to get in. And their initial step is to basically start looking at stuff, looking at how they can exploit things, what else can they run, what can they do. So you'll find like low-hanging fruit stuff, right? Running crypto miners, going and grabbing other credentials they have access to, trying to kind of start snooping around the account. Most of the time, we'd think an attack stops there, right? They're just in there for a quick grab. That's really not the case anymore in the cloud. Most of the time, you'll find that when they take that first step, that crypto miner or that initial action they're taking is not really the end game. That's to kind of mask the other stuff they're trying to accomplish, right? The main goal in the cloud these days is to grab that AIM role, right? Grab that service account, grab what has access to more things, and then they kind of sit and see what else they can pull off, right? They go through enumeration exercises, look for other resource access, start doing more and more things. What I find fascinating about these things is that in the castle model, we all had that wonderful framework, I think that was touted by CrowdStrike. It was 11060, right? It gave us a really good model to basically know how to protect ourselves before someone moves laterally in our environment. In the cloud, that doesn't really hold up anymore. That 11060 model assumed it took at least an hour for someone to move laterally in your environment with some credentials that they grabbed to go do something else. In the cloud, that average time to move laterally is about 10 minutes. So that is drastically faster, right? So really what it comes down to is that time matters the most. So again, if we think about that kill chain, if we can detect it early, we can find it before they break into the environments, that's going to give us the best bang for our buck in trying to prevent what comes next. Another interesting statistic here that I quite like is our threat research team at SysDig did a bunch of work to look at various crypto miners. And we really wanted to know what the cost was, right? What is that cost impact of having one of those executed in your environment? Basically, for every dollar they generate, it costs you $53. So it is 53 times more expensive for you for each dollar they generate, right? That's pretty insane. And realistically, they don't really care, right? It's not their infrastructure, so what does it matter? And so if we think about getting access, coming in, doing things, that's a pretty significant cost to us on that cloud side. And if we're not doing the things we would traditionally do to detect breaches, detect access, we need to keep that in mind, right? We need to do those things first and foremost. The other thing to point out here is that when you do have those breaches, they are not cheap. So we can see here, obviously, crypto mining is expensive, but IBM had a statistic they pulled out in 2021 about the cost of an overall breach. Almost $4.5 million per breach, right? About a quarter of that to a half of that cost is lost potential revenue, lost trust, lost being able to conduct business in the future. And so the breaches have a significant cost when they come down to it. Other thing to consider here too is this is catching a breach in an average amount of time. The longer it takes to catch, the more it costs. So if you think about someone like Equinix, that went on for a long time, right? That was an extremely expensive breach on their part. So all of this is to say that this stuff is real. It does happen, and it is extremely costly, right? This is not insignificant. And so what do you have to do, right? Like how do you deal with these things? Most companies that I talk to and I work with, they start around static analysis, vulnerability management, all the key things that we're all used to doing, right? And those are all great and important to do. Those catch about 90% of all of the vulnerabilities, all of the exploits we find in our cloud infrastructure. So that's pretty useful, except there's 10% that get missed. Those 10%, those are the ones that show up at runtime, right? Those are the things that show up when you actually go and execute the application. You go run something. So you never even see it until your application's in production. So again, if we start thinking about the left half of the kill chain, what do we have to do? What do we need to do? What do we have to have in place to be able to find these things before they cause us issue if they're baked into our applications? So enter in a few tools, right? A few different standards that are out there. So there is a number of things. We'll kind of ignore the first one, right? That's a little too proprietary for my taste because it's my company. But there's things like Atomic Red Team, right? There's things like Stratus Red Team, the MITRE ATT&CK framework. All of these are open standards that are very much about how do I understand a tactic? How do I know what it affects in my environment? And more importantly, how can I simulate that? So if I get back to what I said earlier, how do I make sure that when I'm running an environment in a cloud provider or on premises, that I'm getting the same detections that I expect, that I'm catching the same threats that I expect? These standards like MITRE and the tools like Atomic Red Team really help you do those things. So if we think about Atomic Red Team specifically, it basically almost automates the MITRE tactics. So if I have a particular MITRE technique that I want to go investigate, I want to test against, ART probably has a guide or a script or a prescription per se to go execute that particular tactic, and I can go look for it. Our little tool, this thing called the SDG, that just wraps Atomic Red Team stuff into a container, so it makes it easy to execute. That's the entire purpose behind that one. But the whole goal here is that if we standardize as a community on things like MITRE, on things like Atomic Red Team, it gives us an open standard we can all leverage and then be able to go look at kind of jointly together. Our last speaker had a really, really great line, and it's that we can't do it alone. And that's something that I very adamantly believe, especially in our security space. I would say that most security organizations traditionally like to think of their contribution to the company as a competitive differentiator, right? It's their thing, that's their secret sauce, especially in the commercial space. It gives them a quote-unquote advantage. I would state that most of our attackers are not doing that. They're not keeping it to themselves. They are collaborating, they're working together, they are leveraging kind of the group mind, so to speak. And I think it's rather ostentatious for us to kind of believe that we can do better on our own, right? If we're not working together in the same capacity to be better and do better, we're setting ourselves up to fail from the start, right? Standards like this, like Atomic Red Team, like MITRE, help bring us together as a community at large. So, off that soapbox, in the tests themselves, what do they have, right? So Atomic does a great job listing all sorts of different tests. The link's kind of hard to see, but I'm sure they'll provide the deck. Basically, they lump a lot of their things together in various permutations. These ones in particular are tests they've lumped together for containers. So this would be stuff that you could run against a Docker instance, a Kubernetes instance, an EKS instance, whatever you want to call it, and look for low-hanging fruit attacks that you should be protecting yourself against, right? So things like doing resource discovery in a container, listing Kubernetes secrets, doing crypto or cron job executions, things like that. Probably one of the single biggest things I see in my daily life. I do a lot of work with Kubernetes customers. They don't think about the fact that when they go create their EKS cluster or their AKS cluster or their random alphabet cluster, that it is not out-of-the-box secure, right? It's out-of-the-box default. That's that whole wonderful shared security model that we all live in with the cloud. They'll provide the infra, we have to provide the security. And so you have to go in and tune these things down. You have to close off ports. You have to do all that stuff you would traditionally do, but it's that much harder because it's all abstracted away. If I think about the Castle example, and I've got, my DC or my domain controller, I've probably got, blah, 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 DC01. I know exactly what that server is, exactly what should be open, exactly what it's doing. In the land of Kubernetes and containers, they basically put stuff anywhere there's resources free, right? It's worse than a virtual machine. You have something like ESXi, you spin up a machine somewhere with resources, it's still kind of a big giant machine doing its thing. When it's a container, it can be completely commingled, completely abstract, it can be anywhere all over your infrastructure. So knowing what's running where becomes extremely difficult. So if I'm looking for like, hey, there was an escape from a container to a host, well, what application did that container belong to? What development team is responsible for that thing? Where does that exist in the infrastructure? Those questions become ridiculously complex to answer. And it's by the very nature of how it's designed, right? It's really flexible, it's really fast, I wouldn't call it cheap, but there are certain things that can make it be quote unquote cheap. But it certainly has a lot of other things we have to consider as well, right? All these other security posture elements get insane around that system. So what does ART give you, right? If I'm doing this test around something like deploying a cron job or doing a service discovery, basically this is what it gives you, right? It gives you a detailed explanation of how a particular attack would be pulled off. So in this case, this one is a exfiltration over a alternate protocol with DNS. And so basically, they're executing a series of scripts to go pull data off of port 53 that shouldn't actually be doing that. So there's a couple ways you can find those things, detect those things. You could do something as simple as like, hey, I want to know when there's port 53 traffic that's not UDP. Like, tell me about those events. I want to see if there's a TCP connection happening where it shouldn't belong, right? So there's different ways to go and find these detections. But the key is that the attack itself is standardized. So we can run the same attack in multiple environments and look for the same key indicators in each one of our environments as well. I keep hammering that home because all too often I find that people are very happy with the tooling they have in the market today, and they should be. A lot of it's pretty great, but it looks different in different environments, right? If I run like a Nessus scan on a traditional host, that tells me what ports are open, what I'm exposed to, what configuration's there. I can go fix it on the host itself. I can go to my application team and have them fix it. If I do that same thing in the cloud, and that's running a container, it's running on Kubernetes, getting to what I need to patch, what I need to fix with the tool that I'm using is significantly harder, right? So you just have to be cognizant of when I'm looking for these things, do I have all of the data I need if the event was triggered and found, right? How would I can detect it, great. How would I remediate it? What's my next step? What am I going to do after that point? And so you need, tools or open source things out there to help facilitate those types of actions. So one I wanted to talk about is Falco. This is an open source project that's a CNCF project. It has become a runtime standard for detecting anomalous activity across cloud resources. So it can intercept system calls to look at stuff happening in a node. It can intercept log data, so it can intercept things like Kubernetes API changes. It can intercept stuff against cloud logs. So if you make like an S3 bucket exposure, so I made that public, then I changed it back to private, it can find those things. It's a tool that's purpose-built to live across kind of the ecosystem in the old world and the next, right? So it's looking for data surrounding events. It's trying to pull in more contextual information. It's not just about IPs. It's not just about resource names or things like that. It's trying to give you significantly more context because that context matters in your response side. Again, if we can prevent it before it ever happens, that's better. It means we don't have to deal with the response. But when we do get to that stage, we have to have tools that are adaptable, that give us data in a format that makes sense for where we're trying to live, right? So I guess it's a long way of saying we can't really shoehorn what we did yesterday into what we have today because a carnival looks really different than a castle. So, just to kind of hammer the point home, we had what T1 or 1048 look like from a test inside of Atomic Red Team. From a Falco perspective, this is what a detection of that exact same thing looks like, right? And so the nice thing about this is since we're all open standards across all this stack, we can write very tailored things to hit all of the different attack framework that we see, all the different protocols that we see, all the different tactics and procedures that we see out there. So again, it's kind of the power of the community concept. If we're leveraging open standards, we don't rely on one person to write this. We rely on everybody to write this together, to work together, to build the detections, to build our posture going forward. In terms of what does it actually look like? How does it kind of go? I mean, I'm a nerd, so I like this in particular. But basically, rules in Falco are just YAML, and they let you be able to link to macros, link to lists. So if I wanted to do something like tell me when a shell opens up on a host, I could say, well, I only care about when a process spawns, and that process name is ZSH, SSH, BSH, whatever my shell permutations are. And it gives me that flexibility to go and find those things, and then more importantly, tag it. So I can say, well, this particular rule, it needs to be in scope of, like, say, a SOC 2 audit, or a PCI thing, or a GDPR thing, or would insert random compliance framework here. And so when those rules trigger, I can link it back to the things that matter to me as the security professional, right? Is this a SOC violation? Is this a PCI violation that I should be cognizant of? So again, the tooling is evolving significantly, and at least in my opinion, the future of how we do security is probably going to be founded in this open source realm, right? Again, because it brings the community together. We can work together to find different things that go on. One story on this, I have a customer who is a chip manufacturer that you probably all know in Oregon. And they offer a service to their customers where they are all people who authenticated with them. They have accounts with them. They've I confirmed their identity and all that. They can submit containers to a service that they run to validate it runs on their infrastructure, their hardware. It's a great service. They spun it up, and in the first 5 minutes of existence, they had their first crypto miner installed on the cluster. Within 5 minutes, right? And these are coming from accounts that have been authenticated by them already. Like, the rate at which these things happen is absolutely insane, whether or not they're from trusted or non-trusted sources. So I already talked about a few of these things, right? You know, what can you do? What type of detections can you get out there? What can you have? You can do all sorts of insane things these days, right? So especially with a tool like Falco, you can look for shells, you can look for overwritten binaries, you can look for changes in like namespaces, abstract layers of things. Basically, if you can think about it, you can write a rule to detect these things. What I quite like about it is, again, it's one engine that translates between cloud infrastructure as well as, you know, hosts and traditional nodes. So I can do things like, well, I need to know when a developer accidentally makes an S3 bucket publicly exposed, right? I also need to know when a developer opens up a shell on a particular node, right? They probably shouldn't do that in production. Having a tool like Falco that can do all of those things can be really helpful because I can start seeing the correlation of events, right? I can see when things come together. It gives me kind of a standard format to deal with these. And again, it's the kind of the power of the community. When Log4j hit, there were Falco rules out within, you know, tens of minutes about how to detect those things within your environment. I don't know of a way to do things like that faster, right? So it just provides us a different level of protection and a different way to kind of get early on into those phases, early on into that kill chain. So, excuse me. So with that, that's really all I had. Questions from anybody in the audience? Things we can talk about? We've got 3 minutes, it looks like, 4 minutes. Sure. Yeah, so if you couldn't hear the question, it was, is there automation to detections that Falco can do? And the answer is yes. There's this other open tool, imagine that, called Falco Sidekick. Basically, you point Falco at Sidekick, and then Sidekick can do about anything you can think of, from gRPC calls into running like playbooks or runbooks, go make a webhooks, whatever, however you'd like to respond, you can do that in that context. So what a lot of customers or people out there who are using Falco will do is they take like an Ansible tower, spin something like that up. They'll have an event come in via Falco, Sidekick talks to tower, tower does a response action back to that event. Yeah. Cool, well, nothing else. I appreciate your guys' time today. If you ever need anything, hit me up. Happy to talk about nerdy things.